Rub it gently, she directed. The rancher paused, then found the hidden pain Wild West story. The wind whispered softly through the tall grass, carrying the scent of earth, cattle, and distant pine trees. Eli Carter, a man who had spent his entire life on this sprawling ranch, walked along the fence line with a quiet determination. Every post, every rail, every gate was a testament to years of tireless work. The ranch was his life, his pride, and his solitude. Eli was a tall man, with hands roughened by decades of labor and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, sharp and alert, held a depth that hinted at experiences few could imagine. He had lived through harsh winters, droughts, stampeding cattle, and the loneliness of the Wild West. Yet despite everything, he remained steadfast, tending to his land with a routine born of necessity and love. That morning, like every morning, Eli had risen before dawn. He had fed the horses, checked on the cattle, and repaired a gate that had been damaged in a recent storm. Life on the ranch was never easy, but it was predictable, and predictability suited him. He liked knowing the rhythms of the land, understanding each sound, each movement, each change in the air. As Eli adjusted a loose fence post, he noticed a cloud of dust on the horizon. At first, he thought it might be a herd of cattle moving across the plains, but the cloud grew larger, darker, and more purposeful. He straightened up, squinting against the sun, and saw a figure approaching, a woman, riding a sturdy horse with ease and confidence. Her hat was pulled low over her face, but the posture, the grace, the determination of her ride caught Eli's attention immediately. The woman arrived at the gate, slowing her horse to a gentle trot. She dismounted with a smooth, practiced motion, tying her horse carefully before looking around. Eli, curious but cautious, watched her from a distance. He had seen travelers before, some seeking work, others simply passing through, but there was something different about her. She carried herself with quiet confidence, yet there was a softness in her movements that suggested a life of both strength and struggle. "Morning, sir," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I'm looking for work if you have need of help." Eli studied her carefully. The ranch was a place of hard work where mistakes could cost cattle, equipment, or even lives. He had learned long ago not to trust strangers too quickly. "Work?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. "This is no place for someone unprepared. It takes more than skill to survive out here." "I know," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "I've worked on other ranches before. I can handle cattle, horses, fences, whatever needs doing." Eli's eyes narrowed. There was honesty in her words, but there was also something unspoken, a quiet determination that made him pause. He had spent years relying only on himself. He had built this ranch with his own hands, endured losses and hardships that had hardened him. Yet there was a curiosity stirring within him, a sense that this woman might bring something unexpected to his carefully ordered world. "Name S. Eli Carter," he said finally, stepping closer. "This is my land, my ranch. If you're here to work, you'll follow my rules. We do things my way." "Understood," she replied without hesitation. "My name's Clara. I don't need anyone to hold my hand. I learn fast." Eli studied her face for a moment, noting the subtle lines of weariness and experience. There was a hint of sadness in her eyes, a story unspoken but present. He couldn't place it, and he didn't try. Some things revealed themselves with time, and perhaps this was one of them. "Well, Clara," he said finally, "we'll see how you manage. Start with feeding the horses. Then you can check on the cattle. Follow my lead, and you might just make it through the week." Clara nodded, her expression calm but focused. She moved toward the stables with a quiet confidence, handling the horses as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Eli watched her work, noting the way she treated the animals, not with force, but with a gentle understanding that made the horses respond to her naturally. It was impressive, even to someone like Eli, who had spent his life mastering the care of animals. As the morning passed, Eli and Clara worked side by side. She mended fences, carried feed, and even managed a small group of restless cattle with skill that surprised him. Despite her quiet demeanor, there was a presence about her that demanded respect, not through words or authority, but through competence and calm assurance. Eli found himself observing her more closely than he expected, noting small habits, the way she paused to think before acting, the way her eyes seemed to notice things he often overlooked. By mid-afternoon, the sun was high, and the heat bore down on the land. Eli wiped sweat from his brow and leaned on his shovel, watching Clara guide the cattle back to the pen. She moved with ease, her voice soft but firm as she directed the animals. He could see that she had an innate understanding of the rhythm of the ranch, something that could not be taught easily. "Not bad," Eli said finally, breaking the silence. "You've got skill, I'll give you that." Clara glanced at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thanks. I try to pay attention. The land tells you what it needs if you're willing to listen." Eli nodded slowly, impressed despite himself. He had spent years listening to the land, yet here was someone who seemed to hear it in a way that was almost intuitive. There was a subtle respect forming between them, not friendship, not yet, but recognition of each other's abilities. As evening approached, the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink. The ranch was quiet, except for the occasional lowing of cattle or the distant howl of a coyote. Eli and Clara stood near the corral, taking a moment to rest. There was a silence between them, comfortable and easy, filled not with words but with understanding. "You've been on your own long?" Eli asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. Clara looked out across the plains, her expression thoughtful. "A long time," she said softly. "I've traveled, worked, learned. Places come and go, but some things stick with you, memories, mistakes, people you lost." Eli said nothing, simply nodding. He understood the weight of unspoken pasts, the way they lingered beneath the surface. He had his own memories, his own losses, though he rarely spoke of them. There was something in Clara's presence that made him want to hear more, but he held back. Trust was earned slowly out here, in the hard work of daily life, not through words alone. Night fell and the first stars appeared, twinkling over the vast expanse of the ranch. The air cooled, carrying the scent of earth and distant pine. Eli and Clara worked together to secure the animals, check the fences, and make sure everything was in order before the quiet of night settled over the land. As they finished, Clara looked at Eli and said, "This place, it has a rhythm. I can feel it. It's not just land, it's alive in its own way." Eli paused, studying her face. There was truth in her words, a kind of insight that resonated deep within him. He realized that this woman was not just another worker passing through. She had the ability to see the land, to understand it, perhaps even to heal the invisible scars it held, scars that mirrored those within himself. "Maybe," he said slowly, "you'll do fine here, Clara. Maybe better than fine." Clara smiled faintly, sensing the rare acknowledgement from a man who rarely gave praise. There was a quiet satisfaction in the understanding forming between them, a sense that perhaps this meeting, this arrival, was the beginning of something neither of them could yet fully understand. As they settled near the barn for the night, Eli felt a strange sense of anticipation. The ranch had been quiet for too long, and perhaps he thought it was time for change, not in the land but in the heart of the man who had tended it for decades. Somewhere on the horizon, beyond the fading light, possibilities waited, and for the first time in years, Eli felt that life might offer more than just solitude and routine. And in that moment, the ranch, the land, and the life he had built seemed just a little bit brighter. The next morning, the ranch awakened to the soft light of dawn, spilling across the rolling hills and golden fields. Birds sang in the trees near the farmhouse, and the distant lowing of cattle echoed across the plains. Eli Carter had already risen, moving with the ease of a man who had spent decades understanding the rhythms of the land. He began his routine, checking fences, feeding the horses, and making sure the water troughs were full. Clara was up as well, quietly preparing for another day of work. She had grown accustomed to the ranch's pace, but also brought her own sense of order and observation. She studied the horses' behavior, noted the position of the sun, and even checked the fences before Eli could ask. It was clear she had experience, and yet every movement she made carried a patience that spoke of care, not just efficiency. Eli noticed it as he handed her a bucket of feed. "You've got a way with animals," he said. "Not everyone can handle them without getting bit or bucked off." Clara smiled faintly, tipping her hat. "Animals are honest," she said. "They give you what you put in. You treat them rough, they react rough. You treat them gently and they respond. Simple as that." Eli nodded, thinking about her words. There was a lesson in them more than just about horses or cattle. Life, he realized, worked much the same way. Force and anger often made things worse, while patience and understanding brought better results. But Eli had spent much of his life relying on strength, rarely slowing to understand. Perhaps it was time to try a different approach. The morning's chores passed in a rhythm both familiar and new. Clara followed Eli's instructions, but she also added her own touches, tightening loose rope in a particular way, guiding the cattle with a calm, steady voice rather than shouts, noticing small weaknesses in the fences before they became problems. Eli watched her work with a mixture of admiration and surprise. She was competent, yes, but she also had a natural intuition about the land, the animals, and the flow of life on a ranch. By mid-morning, Eli led Clara to a small corral where one of his horses, a stubborn bay named Rusty, had been acting up. The horse refused to step forward, pawing at the ground and snorting, clearly frustrated. Eli had tried everything, gentle coaxing, firm commands, even a light tug on the reins, but Rusty remained stubborn. Clara approached quietly, her hands relaxed at her sides. She studied Rusty for a moment, noticing the tension in his muscles, the way his ears flicked back and forth, and the flicker of fear in his eyes. "Rub it gently," she said, almost a whisper. "Not too hard, just enough to let him know you're there. Show him he can trust you." Eli paused, surprised by her words. "Rub it gently," he repeated, unsure if she meant the horse or some deeper lesson he wasn't yet seeing. "Yes," Clara said, smiling faintly. "It works if you really mean it. Animals and people feel the difference between force and care." Eli knelt beside Rusty and followed her instructions, rubbing the horse's neck softly, speaking in a calm, steady voice. Slowly, Rusty relaxed, lowering his head and stepping forward obediently. Eli felt a strange warmth in his chest, a mixture of relief and unexpected pride. He looked at Clara, realizing that her advice was more than about the horse. It was about understanding, patience, and connection. "That's impressive," Eli said, straightening up. "You've got a gift, Clara, not just with animals but with people too, I think." Clara nodded, but her eyes held a shadow of something else, a memory, a pain, a past that she hadn't shared. "We all carry lessons," she said softly. "Some we learn from the land, some from others, some the hard way." Eli didn't press her further. He had his own memories, his own hard lessons learned on this ranch, and he respected those who carried theirs quietly. Instead, he simply nodded and returned to his chores, though his mind lingered on her words. There was something about Clara, something beyond skill or experience, that made him pause and think. As the day went on, Eli introduced Clara to more of the ranch's responsibilities. She learned to mend broken fences, water the crops, and manage the smaller livestock. Each task was approached with careful attention and an eagerness to learn, yet Clara's way of doing things was different from Eli's. Where he relied on brute strength or speed, she relied on observation, patience, and a gentle touch. It was a style that surprised him at first, but he soon realized it produced better results. During a short break under the shade of a large oak tree, Eli finally allowed himself to ask more about her past. "You've traveled a lot, haven't you?" he said, breaking the silence. Seen other ranches, other places. Clara took a sip of water, her eyes on the horizon. I have, she said quietly. I've worked here and there, always looking for a place that felt like home, somewhere I could belong, not just work. But every place has its challenges, and sometimes people leave before you get a chance to settle. Eli nodded, understanding all too well. Life on the ranch could be lonely. The work was endless, the land demanding, and companionship was rare. He had spent decades alone with only the wind, the animals, and the occasional traveler for company. Clara's presence was unexpected, yet somehow comforting. Maybe you'll find that here, he said slowly. It's not easy, but there's space to grow, space to heal if you let it. Clara's eyes met his, a faint glimmer of gratitude and understanding shining through. Maybe, she said softly, it's hard to know until you try. The afternoon brought new challenges. A section of fence had been damaged in a recent storm, and Eli and Clara worked together to repair it. She passed him nails, held beams steady, and even suggested a better way to reinforce the posts. Her practical knowledge impressed him, and more than that, her calm persistence made the task less grueling. For the first time in years, Eli felt like the work was lighter, not because it was easier, but because someone was sharing the burden with him. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the shadows lengthened across the ranch. The cattle were settled, the fences were secure, and the horses were fed. Eli and Clara paused, standing side by side, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and purple. The land was quiet, the kind of quiet that invited reflection, and Eli felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. You've got a way of noticing things, he said, breaking the silence. Things I miss, even after all these years. Clara smiled faintly. It comes with paying attention, she said. Not just to the land or animals, but to people too. You notice patterns, you notice pain, you notice hope, if you're willing. Eli thought about her words, realizing that there was truth not only in them but also in the way she approached life. She wasn't just strong or capable, she was aware, present, and thoughtful. Those qualities were rare in this world, and he found himself appreciating them more than he expected. That evening, as they finished their chores, Eli found himself offering Clara a simple meal in the small kitchen of the ranch house. The food was modest, bread, stew, and fresh milk, but the conversation flowed easily. Clara shared stories of the places she had worked, the people she had met, and the lessons she had learned. Eli, usually reserved, found himself opening up about his own life, the struggles he had faced, and the loneliness that had marked much of his adulthood. Clara listened quietly, without judgment, offering small words of encouragement or understanding. Her presence was comforting, not overwhelming, and Eli realized that he was beginning to trust her in a way he rarely trusted anyone. The connection between them was subtle, growing naturally through shared work, mutual respect, and quiet understanding. As night fell and the first stars appeared, Eli and Clara stepped outside to look over the ranch. The moon cast a silver glow over the land, highlighting the gentle rise and fall of the hills. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying a sense of promise and renewal. Eli felt a strange mix of anticipation and calm, knowing that this partnership, unexpected as it was, might bring change not only to the ranch but to his own heart. For the first time in a long while, Eli allowed himself to imagine a future where he wasn't entirely alone, where someone else could share the burdens, the joys, and the quiet moments of life on the ranch. Clara had arrived as a stranger, yet in her quiet, patient way, she was teaching him that strength could be gentle and trust could be earned in unexpected ways. And so, as the night settled over the ranch and the wind whispered through the fields, Eli Carter stood beside Clara, watching the stars, feeling the subtle shift of life beginning, a gentle, almost imperceptible change that promised new beginnings and hidden possibilities. Following days on the ranch passed, with a rhythm that was both familiar and new. Eli, Carter, and Clara worked together in a quiet harmony, tending to the cattle, mending fences, and riding the vast stretches of the plains. Each task they faced revealed more about their skills, their patience, and the subtle ways they complemented each other. But beneath the routine of work, a deeper connection began to take shape, one built on observation, understanding, and small gestures that spoke louder than words. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Clara noticed that Eli moved more slowly than usual. He winced as he lifted a heavy bucket of feed, and she could see the faint crease of pain across his brow. "You okay?" she asked gently, her voice carrying a concern that Eli was not accustomed to hearing. "I'm fine," he replied gruffly, brushing it off. "Just an old injury acting up, nothing worth worrying about." Clara studied him for a moment, her eyes sharp yet patient. She had learned over the years to read people as well as animals. She could see the subtle signs of strain, the stiffness in his movement, the way he avoided certain tasks. "You don't have to hide it," she said softly. "Sometimes admitting pain is the first step to fixing it." Eli paused, surprised by her words. He had spent decades alone, relying only on his own strength, rarely showing weakness to anyone. Pain was private, something to endure silently. Yet there was something in Clara's presence that made him hesitate before brushing it off. Her gentle tone, her steady gaze, and the patience she carried were disarming in ways he hadn't expected. "Maybe you're right," he admitted quietly, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "It's just an old injury from years back. It never fully healed, and I guess I've ignored it for too long." Clara nodded, her expression calm. "Let's take a look," she said. "I've tended to injuries before. You don't have to face it alone." Eli allowed her to examine the slight swelling and stiffness in his shoulder and back. She worked carefully, her hands steady and skilled, massaging gently, guiding him through simple stretches to ease the tension. As she worked, Eli felt a warmth spreading, not just through his muscles but through a part of himself that had long been closed off. For years, he had carried pain silently, both physical and emotional. Here was someone offering care without judgment, without expectation, simply presence and understanding. "You're good at this," he said quietly, watching her hands move with precision and care. "Not just the ranch work, this too." Clara smiled faintly, continuing her careful ministrations. "I've had to learn to help others. Sometimes people carry pain that isn't visible. You just need to be willing to notice it." Her words lingered in Eli's mind long after the session ended. He realized that she wasn't just tending to his body. She was opening a door to something deeper. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to acknowledge his own vulnerability, his own hidden scars that had shaped him into the solitary man he had become. As the days passed, Eli noticed more subtle ways in which Clara seemed to understand the unspoken burdens he carried. She observed the way he avoided certain tasks that reminded him of past losses, the quiet moments when he lingered by old equipment or empty pens, and the lingering sadness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Yet, she never pressed him to talk. Instead, she offered presence, patience, and gentle guidance, letting him reveal himself in his own time. One afternoon, while they were riding along the edge of the property, Clara spoke of her own past, not in great detail, but enough to reveal a life shaped by hardship, loss, and resilience. She had experienced failure, disappointment, and moments of fear, but she had also learned strength, perseverance, and the power of patience. Eli listened, realizing that her calm demeanor and steady hands were born of experience, not just skill. She understood the weight of unspoken pain because she had carried her own. "You know," she said quietly as they guided the horses along a narrow trail, "sometimes people carry so much inside, they forget how to let it out. They think showing weakness makes them vulnerable. But the truth is, sharing it can make you stronger." Eli thought about her words. He had spent years believing that strength meant solitude, that relying on no one was the mark of resilience. Yet here was someone demonstrating that true strength could also be gentle, patient, and open-hearted. He felt a shift within himself, a recognition that perhaps it was time to release some of the burdens he had carried alone for so long. Later that evening, as they finished chores and the sky turned to shades of deep orange and purple, Clara noticed Eli pausing near the barn, staring at the horizon. She didn't interrupt, simply standing beside him, offering silent company. After a long moment, Eli spoke, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "There's things I've lost," he admitted. "Family, people I cared for. Life has a way of taking them before you're ready." Clara nodded, understanding more in his silence than any words could express. She reached out, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, not intrusive but steady and reassuring. "It's okay to remember," she said. "It's okay to feel. Pain doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." Eli felt something shift inside him, a long-held wall beginning to crumble. He realized that Clara wasn't there just to work on the ranch. She was there to remind him that even in the harshest places, care, understanding, and connection were possible. He allowed himself to lean slightly on her presence, a simple gesture that felt revolutionary in its trust. The days that followed were filled with subtle changes. Eli found himself speaking more openly, sharing memories and stories that had long remained locked away. Clara listened without judgment, offering empathy and quiet support. Together, they worked the land, tended the animals, and navigated the challenges of ranch life. But there was a new depth to their interactions, one of shared understanding and emotional connection. One evening, a storm rolled in unexpectedly, bringing heavy rain and gusting winds. The cattle were restless, and the fences threatened to give way under the force of the wind. Eli and Clara worked through the storm, securing animals, reinforcing fences, and guiding the herd to safety. Amid the chaos, Eli noticed how calm Clara remained, her movements precise and her voice steady. She was a rock in the storm, and he realized that her presence brought him a strength he hadn't known he needed. After the storm passed, the ranch lay quiet, drenched in the soft glow of moonlight. Eli and Clara walked together across the muddy fields, checking each animal, each fence, each corner of the land. There was a serenity in the shared effort, a sense that the storm had not only tested their skills but strengthened the bond forming between them. As they returned to the house, Eli paused once more, looking at Clara with a newfound respect and appreciation. "You've changed things here," he said quietly. "Not the land, not the work, but me. I didn't realize how much I needed someone to see more than just the surface." Clara smiled faintly, a warmth in her eyes. Sometimes people just need someone to notice. Not judge, not fix, just notice. Eli nodded, understanding the truth of her words. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen, not as the strong, solitary rancher, but as a man with scars, struggles, and a heart still capable of connection. That night, as they sat by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames mirrored the quiet comfort of companionship. Eli reflected on the days since Clara's arrival, realizing that her patience, skill, and gentle persistence had begun to heal invisible wounds he had carried for decades. She had arrived as a stranger, yet she had become a silent teacher, showing him that vulnerability could coexist with strength, and that trust could grow even in the harshest landscapes. As sleep approached, Eli felt a rare sense of peace. The ranch was still, the animals settled, and the night stretched wide and quiet over the plains. He understood now that the land itself, with all its challenges and beauty, mirrored the human heart. Just as the ranch needed care, attention, and patience to thrive, so too did people need care, understanding, and gentle connection to heal. And in Clara, he had found someone who offered all of that, not as a companion in name alone, but as a presence that nurtured, strengthened, and quietly reminded him of the possibility of hope. The days on the ranch had grown longer, yet quieter after the storm. Eli Carter and Clara had settled into a rhythm, working together with a harmony born of trust, skill, and a growing understanding of each other. Yet, even in the wide-open plains of the Wild West, peace was never permanent. Challenges always arrived, often when least expected. One morning, as Eli was inspecting the southern fence line, he noticed unfamiliar hoofprints crossing the land. They were fresh, larger than those of his own cattle, and they led directly from the neighboring ranch. Eli's brow furrowed. It wasn't uncommon for cattle to stray, but these tracks suggested something more, someone testing the boundaries of his land. Clara joined him shortly after, noting the same tracks. "Neighbors?" she asked quietly, concern flickering in her eyes. "Looks like it," Eli said, his voice low and steady. "But this isn't just a stray animal. Someone's trying to push their luck." He walked along the fence, examining it carefully. "I've worked hard for this land. I won't let anyone take advantage of it." Clara nodded, her hands resting lightly on the fence rail. "We'll handle it," she said. "Together. You don't have to face it alone." Eli glanced at her, feeling a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Her presence had become more than just helpful, she was a partner in a way he hadn't anticipated. In the past, he had faced every challenge alone, relying only on his strength and experience. Now he realized that trust could be shared, and that partnership could make him stronger. Over the next few days, the tension increased. The neighboring rancher, a gruff man named Thompson, began moving his cattle closer to Eli's property line. Small confrontations arose, first in words, then in subtle maneuvers as each man tested the other's resolve. Eli had faced disputes before, but this time, he wasn't entirely alone. Clara stood beside him, offering careful advice, helping him plan how to protect the land without escalating conflict unnecessarily. One afternoon, Thompson rode onto Eli's property uninvited, his face set in a scowl. "You've got cattle wandering again," he said, his tone sharp. "Better keep an eye on your fences, Carter. Can't have your animals mingling with mine." Eli straightened, his voice calm but firm. "I keep my fences in order. My cattle stay where they belong. I suggest you do the same." Clara watched silently at Eli's side, ready to intervene if needed. Her calm presence seemed to steady Eli, giving him confidence he hadn't realized he needed. Thompson glared, then spurred his horse and left, though Eli knew this was only the beginning of the challenge. As the days continued, Eli and Clara worked tirelessly to reinforce the fences, guide the cattle, and maintain order on the ranch. The work was grueling, and the stress of the dispute weighed heavily, but there was a quiet strength in facing it together. Clara's insights were invaluable. She suggested new ways to fortify weak spots, strategies to move the cattle efficiently, and even techniques to anticipate problems before they became crises. Eli couldn't help but admire her intelligence, foresight, and composure under pressure. One evening, as they finished repairing a particularly damaged fence, Clara looked at Eli with a serious expression. "There's more to this than just cattle," she said softly. "I can see it in the way Thompson moves, the way he talks. He's testing you, yes, but he's also trying to get under your skin, make you react. Don't let him." Eli nodded slowly, appreciating her wisdom. "I've faced people like him before," he said quietly, "but I've never had someone beside me who sees what I can't." "You're different, Clara, in a good way." Clara smiled faintly, but her eyes reflected a depth of understanding. "I've seen enough to know when someone is trying to provoke you. You can handle it, Eli, but sometimes handling it well means letting someone help." The following day, Thompson returned, this time with a small group of ranch hands. They attempted to drive a portion of Eli's cattle into their own fields, testing his patience and his resolve. Eli remained calm, directing his own hands with precision, guiding the animals back to their rightful place. Clara worked alongside him, her movements deliberate and efficient, coordinating the herd with a quiet authority that surprised the men from the neighboring ranch. Frustrated by their failure, Thompson rode up to Eli again, his voice rising with anger. "You think you can run me off my land? This isn't just about cattle, it's about pride." Eli looked him squarely in the eye, calm but unwavering. "This land is mine. I work it, I care for it, and I won't let anyone take advantage. Pride doesn't give you the right to cross boundaries." Clara stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "You need to leave now, Thompson. There's no reason to escalate this any further. Respect the land and respect the people who work it." Thompson hesitated, caught off guard by her courage and composure. For a moment, he seemed uncertain, as if he had underestimated both the rancher and the woman standing beside him. Finally, he spurred his horse and left, muttering under his breath, but the tension remained. Eli knew the challenge wasn't over. It never truly was in this harsh land, but they had held their ground. After Thompson left, Eli turned to Clara, his expression softening. "I don't know what I would have done without you. You made a difference today." Clara shook her head. "You would have handled it, you always do. I just helped you see it a little differently." Eli smiled faintly, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years. Her presence was no longer just helpful, it was essential. She had become more than a worker on the ranch. She was a partner, a confidant, someone who could face challenges with him and help him navigate both the land and life itself. That night, as they sat by the fireplace, the weight of the day slowly lifted. Eli reflected on the challenges they had faced together, the storm, the disputes, the constant demands of the ranch, and realized how much Clara had changed the way he approached life. Her guidance, patience, and quiet strength had helped him confront not only the external threats, but also the internal ones he had carried for decades. "You've been through a lot," Clara said quietly, her eyes meeting his. "But you handle it all with such resilience." "It's admirable." Eli felt a lump in his throat, an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. "I've had to," he admitted. "Life out here isn't easy. You learn to endure to survive." "But enduring doesn't mean being alone," Clara said gently. "Sometimes strength comes from letting someone stand beside you, not just facing the world on your own." Eli nodded, realizing the truth in her words. He had spent years believing that strength was solitary, that relying on no one was the only way to survive. Yet in the past few days, he had learned a new kind of strength, one built on trust, partnership, and mutual respect. Clara had shown him that facing challenges together could bring more than solutions. It could bring understanding, healing, and connection. In the days that followed, Eli and Clara continued their work, maintaining the ranch and protecting it from further intrusions. The land itself seemed to respond to their efforts, the cattle calm and obedient, the fences secure, and the fields vibrant and healthy. Yet more importantly, their bond deepened. They shared small victories, quiet moments, and mutual respect that grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, after a long day of hard work, Eli sat with Clara on the porch of the ranch house, looking out over the fields as the sun set in brilliant hues of orange and pink. The air was still, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Eli felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. "Not just the ranch, but me. I never realized how much I needed someone to see more than just the work being done." Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "Sometimes all it takes is someone noticing, someone who sees the effort, the struggle, and the heart behind it. That's what matters." Eli nodded, feeling a shift within himself. The challenges they had faced, the storm, the dispute with Thompson, the endless work, had revealed something essential. Life was never easy, but it was richer, fuller, and more meaningful when shared. Clara had shown him that, not through words alone, but through action, patience, and understanding. As night fell and the stars appeared, Eli felt a quiet anticipation for the days to come. Challenges would always arise, as they always had in the Wild West, but he knew that he no longer had to face them alone. Together, he and Clara could navigate the storms, the disputes, and the hardships, finding strength not only in the land but in each other. And in that realization, Eli understood something he had long forgotten. True strength was not just enduring life alone. It was having the courage to trust, to share, and to face the world together. The following morning, the ranch seemed almost peaceful, as if the land itself was. Breathing a sigh of relief. The storm had passed, the neighboring disputes had been settled, and for the first time in weeks, Eli Carter allowed himself to feel a sense of calm. Yet, even in peace, he knew the work was never truly done. The ranch required attention, care, and constant effort, and more than that, life required openness, trust, and courage, the very lessons Clara had been quietly teaching him. Clara was already in the barn, tending to the horses. Her movements were deliberate, calm, and efficient, yet there was a softness in her touch that Eli had grown to admire. Watching her work, he realized just how much her presence had changed the rhythm of his life. Tasks that once felt endless and lonely were now shared, filled with small conversations, laughter, and mutual understanding. Her arrival had shifted something inside him, awakening emotions and a sense of companionship he hadn't known in decades. "Morning, Eli," Clara said softly, glancing up from the stall where she was brushing a horse. "The animals are doing well. They've settled nicely after the storm." "Morning," Eli replied, adjusting his hat and taking a deep breath. "Thanks to you, Clara. You've been a tremendous help." Clara shook her head, smiling faintly. "It's not just me. We work together, that's what matters. You're a capable rancher, Eli. I just help you see the best way to handle things sometimes." Eli paused, reflecting on her words. She was right, of course. Their success wasn't just hers or his, it was theirs, built on cooperation, trust, and shared effort. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of equality and partnership that went beyond work. It was personal. The day passed in steady rhythm. Eli and Clara rode out to check the cattle, walked the fences to ensure no damage had gone unnoticed, and repaired a small section of fence that had weakened over time. Every task felt lighter than it would have alone, not because the work was easier, but because it was shared. Their conversations were relaxed and easy, ranging from practical matters about the ranch to quiet reflections about life. At one point, Eli noticed a younger calf struggling to keep up with its mother. Clara guided the calf gently, speaking in soft tones that Eli had learned carried a weight of patience and care. "Rub it gently," she murmured, as she had with Rusty the horse weeks earlier, guiding the calf without force, only understanding. Eli realized again how much her wisdom had shaped not just the animal's behavior, but his own approach to life. Strength did not always mean pushing forward with force. Sometimes it meant being patient, gentle, and observant. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the plains in golden and orange hues, Eli and Clara returned to the ranch house, tired but satisfied. The land was secure, the cattle were calm, and the fences held strong. For the first time in a long while, Eli felt a sense of completion, not just in the work, but in the harmony he had found with Clara. She had become more than a helper. She had become a presence that brought balance to his life. That evening, as they sat on the porch, Eli spoke quietly, his voice carrying a mix of reflection and gratitude. "Clara, I don't think I ever realized how much I needed someone beside me, not just to help with the work, but to notice, to understand, to share the burdens." Clara turned toward him, her eyes soft but steady. "Sometimes people just need to be seen, Eli. Not judged, not fixed, just seen. You've carried so much alone for so long. It's okay to let someone stand with you." Eli nodded, letting her words sink in. He thought of the years he had spent on the ranch, facing storms, disputes, and loneliness alone. And now, with Clara beside him, he felt a warmth he had thought long buried. He realized that her presence had healed more than just the immediate struggles. She had helped him confront and accept his own vulnerability. Days turned into weeks, and life on the ranch began to feel like a new beginning. Eli and Clara continued their routines, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and maintaining the fields. But there was a subtle shift in the air, a sense of hope, connection, and shared purpose. Their bond had grown, not through grand gestures, but through quiet moments of patience, guidance, and mutual respect. One afternoon, as they worked together to move a group of cattle back to the main pasture, Eli paused and looked at Clara. "You know," he said, a small smile forming, "I've spent so many years believing I could handle everything alone. I thought that was strength. But I've learned. Maybe true strength is letting someone walk beside you, not behind you, not in front, but with you." Clara smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I think that's one of the hardest lessons to learn, but once you do, everything changes." Eli nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He thought of the storm, the disputes, and the long, quiet nights spent on the porch with Clara. He had faced challenges, yes, but he had also faced himself, and found a part of himself that had been locked away for far too long. Her gentle guidance, her calm presence, and her understanding had brought him back to life in ways he hadn't realized he needed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant reds and purples, Eli and Clara stood together at the edge of the fields. The land stretched out before them, alive and thriving, a testament to years of hard work and care. But it was more than the land that thrived. It was their connection, their partnership, and the healing of hearts long burdened. "Clara," Eli said softly, "thank you for everything, for staying, for helping, for just being here." Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight, and nodded. "You don't have to thank me. This is life, Eli. We face it together, and in doing so, we find strength, hope, and maybe even happiness." Eli felt a surge of gratitude and emotion. He realized that life on the ranch, while still demanding and sometimes harsh, had become richer, fuller, and brighter. He had faced storms, disputes, and the long solitude of the Wild West, and through it all, he had found someone who not only understood the land but also the heart of the man who had tended it for decades. That night, as they sat together by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames mirrored the quiet warmth of their companionship. The ranch was still, the animals rested, and the night stretched wide and calm over the plains. Eli reflected on the journey they had shared, from Clara's first arrival as a stranger, to the storm, the challenges with Thompson, and the quiet revelations of trust and care. He realized that life was no longer just about survival. It was about connection, understanding, and the courage to share burdens with someone who truly cared. "Clara," he said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd find this. Not just companionship, but someone who sees me, who sees all of me, and maybe it's time I stopped carrying everything alone." Clara reached out, placing a hand over his. "You don't have to, Eli, not anymore. We face life together now." And that's more than most people ever get. Eli felt a rare peace settle over him, a calm certainty that the days ahead would be brighter, not just because the land was strong, but because hearts were stronger together. The ranch, the animals, the work, they were all part of life. But so too was care, understanding, and connection. And in Clara, Eli had found all three, a gentle presence that had healed old wounds and brought hope for the future. As the stars appeared in the sky, shining over the rolling hills and quiet fields, Eli knew that life on the ranch had changed forever. Not because the land itself had shifted, but because the man who had tended it for so long had finally opened his heart. He had learned that strength could be gentle, that trust could be shared, and that even in the rugged Wild West, hearts could heal and hope could flourish. Eli Carter and Clara stood together, looking out over the ranch, feeling the quiet triumph of shared effort, understanding, and the healing power of companionship. The past, The storms, the struggles, the pain was still there, but it no longer defined them. They had faced it, endured it, and emerged stronger together. And in that quiet, golden light of the setting sun, Eli realized that life, like the ranch he had built with his hands, could thrive, not just through hard work, but through care, patience, and the gentle touch of someone who truly understood. The journey was not over. There would be more storms, more challenges, more days of endless work. But Eli no longer faced them alone. And in that knowledge he found not only strength, but hope, joy, and the quiet certainty of a new beginning.